We mentioned this specific type of fiber you'd include if somebody's trying to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that are tuning in, well, in the West, it's just there are so many people these days that are battling with a weight challenge. What else would you add to that protocol to help them out?
Akkermansia. I would use Akkermansia. So there's this bacteria called Akkermansia, very easy to find, that increases GLP-1. Now, most people are tuned in enough to know that all the Hollywood stars are using Ozempic, right, which is the weight loss peptide. Well, what that does is what Akkermansia does. It increases GLP-1. So rather than going to a physician and getting a prescription and injecting yourself with this peptide, you can simply seed Akkermansia into your body and start losing weight right away, as it does the same thing, but the way nature intended. So I always like to use a little Akkermansia. And that gives people a lot of encouragement. Uh, and then, of course, we always balance blood sugar. Always. Yeah, that's really a big piece. And we might look at Firmicutes, Bacteroidetes, some of those other bacterial ratios that lead to weight gain, especially if someone has had a lot of antibiotics as well.
Let's talk more about the blood sugar piece because this is something that is so common. People that are, snacking between meals, always trying to bring up their blood sugar because they've, you know, probably had too many carbs at the last meal and they're having those drops and they need to help boost it back up. How do you look at that as a whole? Somebody that wants to start regulating it better, is it just about cutting down on carbohydrates or how do you help somebody with their metabolic health?
I will usually, it depends on the case, but I will very often get them into ketosis. Now, we don't do a high fat ketosis like I would with seizures or cancer because we want the person to use their own fat stores for energy. So we do like a moderate protein, moderate fat, lower carb. And the carbs that we use are from those soluble fiber vegetables if we have that option with that person's digestive system, because we've been almost brainwashed to think that weight gain and being overweight or obese is a character flaw, that we're not disciplined enough, that we've eaten too much and exercised too little. But it's really a state of inflammation is really what it is. And anytime someone is struggling with their weight, it's an indication that something is not right in the body. Something is creating inflammation, because a healthy person with a healthy microbiome does not ever struggle with weight. It doesn't matter if they eat a lot, actually. The microbiome handles that just fine, and their weight stays the same all the time. If you think back to, or even just go into antique shops, people didn't have multiple sizes of clothing in each closet. They had the same things through their whole life. Their body was always the same. And it didn't matter that the season changed or that the diet changed by season. Their weight would maintain the same. Now, we have very stretchy clothes today, so someone can gain 30 pounds and not realize until they look at a picture. But that has to do with the microbiome. And so I think if we start looking at weight more like a health condition, of which it is, right? It's like blaming someone for having cancer. That would be ridiculous, right? We shouldn't blame someone for weight either, but rather look at what's actually going on there, that there's inflammation being created when it shouldn't be, that it's suppressing the immunity, right? Even if your BMI, which BMI is a little ridiculous, but even if your BMI is only 25, let's say, uh, that suppresses your immunity by over 30% to every infection, to cancer, to anything that can be affected by that. So the weight epidemic we have is really quite significant. And everything from the light that we're using at night, that's a huge thing that I change. FYI, we get at the HRV and we get the blue light out in the evening, so that we can regulate ghrelin and leptin, the hunger hormones. But in general, I just try to get them to where they're actually satiated. They're not hungry. Their blood sugar isn't spiraling. We definitely don't do snacking. Absolutely not. Yeah, because that keeps the blood sugar high. And we'll bring in fasting when it's appropriate as well.
All right, let's talk more about the fasting and the no snacking.
Sure.
Are you a fan of 3 meals a day or how do you look at a person's health and decide on that?
I will start them at 3 meals a day, but I like to get them down to 2 or 1. is what I do. And I do it when it comes natural. So I try not to force it so that we don't have an added stress. Right. I like to keep whatever stress we can low. So if they're starving, that's not going to help to get them to a place of low inflammation, right? Because that cortisol that they're going to have in response to it is going to spike the inflammation, and that means weight gain and reactive eating. So instead, we will get them to 3 meals a day, plenty of protein and fat, so that their satiety hormone is triggered. Bring the carbs down. Sometimes it depends on how well the person is. If they're very well and we basically have weight loss and some minor things, I'll often bribe them with like keto junk food. I'll have them make cheesecake or something that doesn't have sugar, because it's very easy to make that very healthy. We'll start with those things, because once their hunger goes away and once they feel like they're getting treated, they're not just eating salads, they don't care about the healthy junk food anymore, because they're not hungry. They're satiated. So then we kind of go in stages and get to healthier, more traditional, more traditional. I like to go that way. I find it much kinder, much more kind than to kind of, go the puritanical route and be like, you have to know all these things and you have to utterly change your diet. And you need to be eating sheep's brain. That just turns people off. So I bribe them with cheesecake and then we get going.
How often would you recommend somebody do a longer fast? Earlier, you talked about dry fasting, so you can bring that in too. In a more therapeutic sense, how can somebody incorporate some longer fasts and different type fasts?
Well, I like to do a 3-day fast. So if someone is well enough, if they don't have wasting, then a 72-hour fast is great, right? That's where you get the most benefit with the least amount of negative stress. Now, I don't do much of the long-term fasting. I do have clients that have. I had one who did a 40-day fast before I met them. There's certainly times for that where you might want to do a 7-day or something like that. But I tend to do the 72-hour myself. And that's what I'll teach for people once they're pretty healthy. For that can be once a month to once a season. It's not only great for your health, it's actually very great for your mind. I do it more for the internal, for the discipline, for the character building. I find it very good for that. And then you also get the health benefit, which is nice. But those are the ones I usually do. Now, in terms of dry fasting, those you have to be monitored or you have to be healthy enough for. The folks I work with typically have very irregular vasopressin. So I haven't pushed that. But in my own self, what I do is I practice it whenever I need to. So like the first time was an accident. I was hiking on Mount Olympus and I hadn't arranged the trip and someone else did. And I didn't know we were going to be gone for so long and no one brought anything. So I just flipped it to the positive and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to dry fast. This is good for me, right? Instead of like miserable. So that's kind of how I would do it. Or if I have a 17-hour flight, I'm going to do it for that. Those kind of things is usually when I will bring it in. But I've certainly had friends and colleagues who have done it much more intentionally. And it really is pretty amazing, dry fasting.
All right, last piece I want to tie into all this for weight loss and beyond, movement. How do you look at that for somebody, again, in both those cases?
Thank you for bringing that up. I don't think anyone ever asked me that. The movement I usually have folks do is the traditional and ancestral movement. So that's going to be things like walking, hiking, biking, swimming, dancing. Dancing is ideal if you're healthy. These movements all really pull the lymph. It cleans the lymph. We often forget that our lymph system, it does not have a pump. We do need to move. But the problem I find is that especially in America, North America, everyone is so outcome driven and rather masculine, right? The women's workouts are very masculine, which produce an enormous amount of cortisol. They make you more hungry and actually get in the way of weight loss. So if you go to CrossFit, you'll see a lot of women who have extra weight on them. They're very strong. I don't mean that, but there's the padding. There's quite a bit. And that comes from that spike of cortisol, right? Males and females handle that very differently. So it's really more ideal for us to do a bike ride rather than a spinning class, right? A walk rather than a run. I never let people run. I don't care how much they love it or how good it is for the mental state. It's really problematic for things like weight loss and healing because it's pumping cortisol constantly, stress. And what is stressful to our body is very different than us emotionally. Very, right? Like eating at different times is a massive stress for the body. So I like the more you can get very strong. Like I do a power yoga every morning. I guess I should mention that. So you could do something like that. But things that don't tend to cause negative stress because we do have so much stress in our current society. Yeah, you want to mitigate it where you can, but still move.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
We've been told to push fiber and that it's good for bacterial diversity, but diversity doesn't equal health. What equals health is what bacteria are in the gut. We like to think the microbiome is the gut. It's not, it's everything. Getting a lot